I sat there invisible, a ghost in my beige cardigan. Across the lounge, Richard, my ex-husband, laughed his new wife, clinging to his arm like an accessory. "What are you doing here, Elena? Waiting for a ride," he mocked. But he had no idea. Today wasn't just any day. This was the moment everything changed. He thought he had won. He thought I was a nobody. But as his laughter echoed, a private jet was landing outside, ready to take me to a new life he couldn't even imagine. I sat there trying to remain invisible, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup, feeling out of place in the plush, expensive lounge. The soft hum of quiet conversations around me seemed like a world I wasn't supposed to be in. My oatmeal-colored cardigan, a simple piece I wore to blend in, felt like a costume in this sea of cashmere designer suits and polished shoes. It wasn't just the clothes, it was the life that seemed so far out of reach. A life Richard had taken for himself, leaving me behind with the remnants of a dream I'd helped build. When we were married, I was his partner, the person who had built everything from the ground up. We'd met at Stanford, two ambitious souls. Richard, the charming business major, and me, the shy computer science grad who spoke more in code than conversation. He was the face of our company Helios AI, and I was the engine, the one who built the algorithms that made everything possible. We were a team. Or at least that's what I thought. But as soon as the money and success started rolling in, things changed. Richard stopped seeing me as his equal. At first it was subtle. He would take more credit for our achievements, slowly erasing me from the picture. I was okay with it for a while. I was content in the background doing the work I loved. But then came Chloe. She was young, vibrant, and had a massive social media following. Everything I wasn't. Richard was smitten, and soon I wasn't just replaced in his life, I was erased. The divorce was a nightmare. His lawyers, armed with the wealth he'd amassed from my ideas, painted me as a bitter woman, unable to cope with the loss. They made sure to strip me of everything I had worked for. The company, the house in the Hamptons, the art collection, they were all his. I was left with a small cash settlement and a patent for an idea I had once thought was worthless. That patent, the one Richard had dismissed as academic and unimportant, was the key to everything. At the time, I didn't know it, but the only thing Richard hadn't taken from me was that single scrap of work, a side project I had filed away for a rainy day. For 18 months, I lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Jersey, surviving off the last of the settlement money. The world around me kept moving, but I was stuck rebuilding in silence. I didn't have the luxury of flashy launches or investors fighting to buy into my ideas. All I had was a rented server and a quiet obsession with one thing, bringing my patent to life. I spent countless sleepless nights coding, perfecting my system. The more I worked, the clearer it became. The logistics algorithm I had created wasn't just a small project, it was revolutionary. It could solve a massive problem in global supply chains that no one had been able to crack for decades. It was worth billions. But I wasn't interested in getting back at Richard. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to prove to myself that I could do it, to show that I could build something even bigger than the company we had founded together. And then one day, when I thought I was done and had nothing left to lose, a message came through. Astronomics, the global tech conglomerate, had contacted me. They wanted to meet. They were interested in my platform. I couldn't believe it. My first instinct was to double-check the email, expecting it to be some sort of prank. But it wasn't. They were real. They had the resources, the reach, and the connections I needed to take my work to the next level. But it wasn't just about the deal. It was about the quiet revenge of building something that Richard, in his arrogance, had never believed in. Today, I was flying to Geneva, not in economy class, but in a private jet to sign the papers that would change everything. The same Richard who had laughed at me, who had treated me like a footnote, was about to watch as my success surpassed everything he had ever built, and he would never see it coming. I tried to keep my hands from shaking as I sat there waiting for the announcement. The whole place felt like it was moving at a different speed than I was. The sleek, expensive lounge hummed with a quiet rhythm, one that seemed to mock my nervous energy. Richard and Chloe were still over by the coffee bar, laughing loudly, oblivious to everything around them. "Look at her," Chloe Richard's voice carried over. "It's almost sad, isn't it? She's still playing pretend in this world like she belongs here." Chloe giggled, but it wasn't a joyful sound. It was high-pitched, a mocking titter that echoed in my ears. It was the kind of laugh I'd heard too many times, the one that used to make my heart sink every time it came from him. But not today. Today, I was no longer the woman who shrank in the face of his insults. Today, I wasn't some invisible, quiet ex-wife invisible to the world. I was Elena Hayes, the woman who built something they would never be able to understand, and they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The attendant walked by and my heart skipped a beat. She stopped in front of me with a soft, polite smile. "Miss Hayes, your flight is ready. It's time to board." If you'll follow me, please. My breath caught in my chest. I had to force myself to stand. My legs felt like they were made of stone, but I moved one step at a time, feeling Richard's eyes burn into my back. He must have seen the change in me, this calmness. I couldn't hide, no matter how hard I tried. His voice rang out now, sharper, demanding. Wait a second, Elena. He was walking toward me, his perfectly polished shoes tapping against the floor, his face scrunched in confusion. Where do you think you're going? You think you're just going to walk away like this? I didn't answer him. I couldn't. What was there left to say? He wasn't worth my time anymore. I had a plane waiting for me, and he still couldn't comprehend what was happening. Richard was too wrapped up in his own delusions, still clinging to the idea that he controlled everything, including me. Chloe trailed behind him, her voice whiny and loud. Ricky, don't waste your time with her. It's not like she's going anywhere special. She's just here for a little coffee and a sad reality check. I looked at her, her fake tan, her oversized sunglasses, her bored expression. She was everything. I wasn't everything I had never been. But today, I didn't feel inferior. I felt liberated. The attendant led me through the door toward the tarmac. The sound of my footsteps echoed in my mind, drowning out the noise behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what I was leaving behind, but more importantly, I knew what I was stepping into. The Gulfstream G650 was right there on the runway, its sleek body gleaming in the sunlight. My heart raced as I got closer. I could already feel the power of the plane, the freedom it promised. This was the moment everything changed. As we walked closer, I heard Richard's voice again louder, this time his words tinged with desperation. Elena, wait, what's going on? You're not supposed to be here. You can't afford this kind of luxury. What is this, some joke? I stopped for a moment just before I stepped onto the stairs that would take me up into the jet. I turned slightly just enough to meet his gaze. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the flicker of panic that was beginning to set in. I smiled just a little. I told you, Richard, I'm waiting for a flight. His face twisted. What flight? This doesn't make any sense. You can't afford this. You're just a nobody. The words cut deeper than they should have, but I didn't show it. The anger I once felt for him had been replaced by something much colder, something more satisfying. I didn't need to explain myself to him anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. What's the matter, Richard? I asked, my voice steady but firm. You thought you took everything from me, but I'm the one who's really in control now. His face turned pale. What are you talking about? You didn't build anything. I built Helios. I made it a success. You're just the code monkey in the basement. Remember that I didn't flinch. I didn't get angry. Instead, I let the silence hang between us like a heavy weight before speaking again. You're right about one thing. I was in the basement. But I wasn't just writing code. I was building something you'd never understand. Before he could respond, I turned and climbed the stairs, my legs finally moving with purpose. The jet door closed behind me with a solid thud, shutting Richard and his ignorance out of my life once and for all. The moment the door clicked, shut, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I looked out the window, watching Richard stand there rooted to the tarmac, his face contorted in disbelief. And for the first time in years, I felt a peace I didn't know I needed. The plane's engines started, and I could hear the hum of power beneath me. It wasn't just a machine, it was a statement. I had won. The engines roared to life as the Gulfstream G650 taxied down the runway. I felt the jet's power hum beneath me, vibrating through the floor. It was smooth, controlled. For the first time, in what felt like forever, I wasn't out of place. I wasn't small. As we picked up speed, the familiar weight of Richard's mockery began to fade. The ground beneath us blurred, and soon the sleek luxury of Teterboro Airport was a memory shrinking away with every second. Then I saw him. Richard had followed me. I glanced out the window, and there he was running toward the plane, his arms flailing, Chloe following behind in her heels. Richard's face was twisted with panic, his figure small in the distance. He was shouting, but I couldn't hear his words. I didn't need to. I leaned back, steadying myself in the plush leather seat, my pulse quickening, not from fear, but from something else, satisfaction. This was it. He was no longer in control. He couldn't reach me anymore. Miss Hayes, the flight attendant said softly, her voice smooth and polite, we've been instructed by security to inform you that Mr. Davenport will not be able to follow you. I nodded. That's fine. Let him figure it out. The flight attendant didn't bat an eye, continuing with her duties, as if nothing were out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, Richard's figure grew smaller, his futile attempts to reach the plane like a ghost fading with every passing second. My heart raced, but this time it was for a different reason. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to be. Richard's arrogance, his sneers, all of it was being erased. He couldn't hurt me anymore. He couldn't take what was mine. I looked down at my phone as it buzzed in my bag. A message from Julian Thorne. Miss Hayes, I trust you're en route to Geneva. We'll discuss the next steps when you arrive. I believe today marks the beginning of something great for you. A smile tugged at my lips. That was all I needed. The confirmation that I had done it, that I had finally beaten Richard at his own game, and I didn't even have to say a word to him. The plane began to level off the world beneath us. Nothing but clouds and distant landscapes. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just about escaping my past. This was about seizing control of my future. Richard might have thought I was nothing. He might have believed I was a footnote in his story, but I wasn't. I was Elena Hayes, and I had just rewritten my own narrative. The flight attendants went about their work as the plane smoothly cut through the air, heading toward the horizon. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel peace, not the kind that comes from running away, but the kind that comes from knowing you've fought for something, that you've earned your place. I looked out the window again, watching Teterboro fade into the distance. Richard's smug face was a thing of the past. I had something bigger waiting for me, a future I had built from scratch, one that would never again be defined by his ridicule. And as the Gulfstream G650 soared higher, I finally understood. This was my moment. The plane leveled out as we flew high above the clouds. The noise of the engines became a steady hum beneath me, and I leaned back into the plush leather seat. The tension in my chest began to fade, replaced by a calm certainty. This was my moment. The ground beneath me, the life I had left behind Richard, his smug face, his mocking laughter felt so far away now. I looked out the window at the vast expanse of sky. The airport, the city, the life I had built before, all shrinking into the distance. Everything Richard had once claimed as my company, my name was fading behind me. The text from Julian Thorne flashed through my mind again. We'll discuss the next steps when you arrive. This wasn't just a business deal anymore. It was everything. It was my chance to prove that I was more than what Richard had written me off to be. A footnote, a nobody. No, I wasn't that. Miss Hayes, the flight attendant's voice cut through my thoughts. We'll be arriving soon. Can I get you something to drink? I shook my head. No, thank you. I'm fine. The attendant smiled politely and went about her duties. I looked down at the simple tote bag I carried with me, feeling the weight of everything it represented. I had made it. I had gone from nothing, from a small apartment with barely enough to survive, to this, a private jet, a global company, and a future that was entirely my own. When we landed in Geneva, the car ride to Astronomics headquarters felt like a blur. The streets, the buildings, all felt like a world I had built for myself. My future wasn't just about leaving Richard behind, it was about creating something far more powerful. A world where I called the shots. The Mercedes rolled to a stop in front of a sleek building with glass windows that reflected the city's lights. This was it. Mr. Richter Julian Thorne's chief of staff met me at the entrance. He didn't need to say much. His presence alone said everything. Miss Hayes, welcome, he said, his voice low and professional. I followed him inside. Julian Thorne was waiting in a minimalist office that overlooked the city. The view was impressive, but it was Julian himself who commanded my attention. Unlike Richard, who always needed to be the center of attention, Julian was different. He was calm, measured, and sharp. He stood as I entered, extending his hand. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. The pleasure is mine, I said, shaking his hand firmly. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please sit. As I settled into the chair, Julian opened a thick folder and slid it across the desk. I've been following your progress, Miss Hayes. What you've built is nothing short of extraordinary. You'll lead our new global logistics division. You'll be at the forefront of something monumental. My heart raced with anticipation. This was it, the moment I had worked for. I had left behind the life I had once shared with Richard, but now I was stepping into a role where my worth was undeniable. I picked up the pen he offered, feeling its weight. This wasn't just a signature. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another one, where I had control, one where I was no longer invisible. I signed. As I walked out of the building later, a quiet satisfaction filled me. This wasn't just about the deal. It was about everything I had done to get here. The late nights, the isolation, the way I had rebuilt myself from the ashes of everything Richard had taken. I climbed into the car waiting for me, and as we drove through the streets of Geneva, I realized that my journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Richard had thought he'd won. He'd thought I was nothing. But now, as I sat in the back of the sleek car, with the skyline of Geneva in front of me, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just the footnote he had made me out to be. I was the one writing the book,